This is why I ultimately made the film, because although when I exposed it 26 years ago, a whole lot of stuff happened. It was a big story for a while, front page of the New York Times many times. But the bottom line was they continued to hold to, well, okay, this is proven fact now. We'll tell you when, where, and what was used, but that's it. Not a single serviceman who was exposed to a variety of things, from deadly lethal, like anthrax and VX nerve gas. And in this film, I don't want to ruin the kicker, but there is news in this film. A piece of stuff that had never been seen before that acknowledges that servicemen were harmed and some were even killed.
Well, welcome to another edition of SOS America. I'm your host, Charles Feldman. Thanks again for being with us, whether you're watching or listening. We appreciate it. Today's episode, we're going to take a turn in a slightly different direction. Well, actually, maybe it's more than a slightly different direction, because we're going to talk about a film. We're going to talk about a full-length documentary motion picture. And if you have been following this podcast, you right now may be scratching your heads going, what does that have to do with the theme of this podcast, SOS America? Well, what it has to do with is it has to do with what appears to be, according to the film and its investigative reporter, who you will meet in just a moment. It appears to have been a very long-standing cover-up by the United States government, the military certainly, and maybe even up to and including the White House, and one that spans several administrations. So it's not just about Democrats or Republicans. It's not even just about, I know it's hard to believe, but it's not even actually just about Donald Trump, although most things nowadays seem to be just about Donald Trump. But it does include his administration, because the cover-up apparently still continues. And so with that, and before we get to actually showing you a quick clip of the film, let me introduce our guest for this episode of SOS America. Eric Longabardi is a award-winning, many awards for that matter, television producer, journalist. He's done it all for many different organizations. He has worked for a sort of alphabet soup of network television, ABC News, CBS News, Fox News, CNN, and he currently has the film, as I just mentioned. It is called Autumn Gold, and I'm sure that you're wondering why it's called that. So, Eric, welcome to SOS America. And first of all, let's explain the title of this film. Why is it called Autumn Gold? Which sounds very nice. Sounds very pleasant.
Yeah, it's a pretty catchy name. And Autumn Gold, just to give the audience the basics about it, is a specific test, a secret biological and chemical warfare test that took place off of Hawaii in May of 1963 for about 3 months. It was a part of a much bigger covert top secret program, but that is a specific test. And to boil it down in simple terms, because I never claimed to be a rocket scientist, just an investigative journalist, it was the test that garnered me the absolute, indisputable, proven in a court of law proof about what happened in this testing program, which was not by accident like Agent Orange, not inadvertently by a lot of other things, Gulf War syndrome, burn pits, Camp Lejeune, all these toxic exposures, but on purpose and by design, the secret testing program to use U.S. servicemen and a few others. I'll get into that later, but primarily U.S. servicemen, U.S. Navy sailors as targets and human test subjects in specific testing where they sprayed them at sea with various compounds, a whole variety of compounds, and exposed them to different things where they were purposely used as human test subjects. There were gargle samples and throat swabs. It was part of the design and the protocol of the testing from the start. They set it up that way.
Okay, and so we are going to go into in much greater detail two things about what happened to these military men and women. Also, we want to talk about the cover-up, and also how you got involved, because that in and of itself is part of the story and part of the film. So I'd like the audience to watch, and if you're listening, to listen to a small clip. This is the trailer from the film that is now out. It is called, again, Autumn Gold, and here's a quick look at it.
They called me 2 days ago to tell me my cancer's in the middle of my spine now, so just how it is. I'm still all-American, but I don't have a lot of trust in the government.
The show I was working on was called American Journal, and we had a tip line. There was a message left on that tip line saying my brother-in-law was in the Navy, and he was on a ship in Hawaii back in 1963, and he had seen some really strange stuff.
The whole thing was unusual to start with. We were first sent to Hawaii to do boat operations. Then we get over there and we don't do boat operations. And then they send the ship out every night with half the crew on it.
I knew something was different about what went on because there was an airplane flew over and I could see that it sprayed something.
There were people in chemical suits on the ship with some type of apparatus monitoring what was going on. This went on for 3 months. It always bothered me from that point.
When they told him it didn't exist, it never happened, I knew they were lying. I had to go get the operational orders for this ship, and lo and behold, there was. What is Autumn Gold? It actually referenced the Deseret Test Center in Utah, the home of biological and chemical weapons on the West Coast. During the Cold War, chemical and biological weapons were new. They were developed by both the United States and the Soviet Union in basically an arms race.
All these years, I always wondered what they sprayed me with.
And they used human guinea pigs in the testing. Didn't tell anybody about it. Don't ask why. Just do or die.
Well before their time, people have died.
Get out of here.
They were checking to see just how much they could spray us with and how much of it we would ingest, because you know they were wanting to see if they could kill the people on the outside and the inside as well.
And out of the blue came a phone call that would change everything.
One day, the head of our audiovisual section said, I've got a closet full of 16 millimeter films that you might want to look at.
These are all very old men. Once they all die, the problem dies classified.
Well, that's just a small clip from Autumn Gold. There's a lot more to unpack from it, obviously. And so let's try to do that now on this particular podcast. So, Eric, let's now backtrack. You kind of gave us a thumbnail sketch before we showed the clip, but let's get into that in a little more detail. What is it exactly that the United States military did? What did they set out to do, and why was it done with, apparently, according to the film, great secrecy?
The reason it was done back in the Cold War, me and you remember, maybe the young kids don't, the development of biological and chemical weapons, like nuclear weapons, was hot and heavy and occurring at a very rapid pace with not exactly all the scientific know-how that they needed. So they were testing a weapons system. It really comes down to really simple. They were testing biological and chemical weapons and the use of them and how to do a weapons test. I kind of try to keep it simple. It was a weapons test. This wasn't an experiment to see if people got sick. It was there were experiments to both offensively and defensively. It's a fine line between the two. Test these weapons. If they were going to use them, they'd have to know how to use them. You can't just spray anthrax or other things and hope they work and hope they hit the target and hope they kill the enemy, which all weapons are, designed to do. So that was the purpose of it. So it started in early 1962 under Robert McNamara and then President Kennedy, and then went all the way through 1973 72, when Nixon stopped biological and chemical testing. So it covered a lot of different administrations. It was across the board. And I like to say about the film, it's completely apolitical. I mean, the film is about servicemen being used as human test subjects and not informed, and it covered up and never was acknowledged until it took me 6 years to break the story. Finally, at the CBS Evening News, the expose, I call it, which finally had them acknowledging that it actually happened. Before that, they denied it. They told servicemen, anybody who had any little tidbit of information that, hey, I saw a guy in a gas mask. I was on this ship. They basically told them, didn't exist. You're hallucinating. Get some help. And it took a long time to get the proof to show that it actually happened, and then they acknowledged it. But not unlike their 40-year cover-up, the actual facts about what happened, they said, don't worry, nobody got hurt. And then when you look into what they actually did, they said, well, you lied and covered it up for 40 years. You expect us to just take your word for it that nobody got hurt? I mean, you used anthrax, you used VX nerve gas, you used a lot of other things, other bacterium and cadmium compounds. And what ironically turned out to be the most dangerous was a decontaminant that was a known carcinogen at the time. And it boiled down to my initial source saying, I was on this ship. I saw a guy with a gas mask and walked by with a chemical suit on, and they were installing machines on our ship I'd never seen before. Most people didn't see anything, only a few did. And when he asked, what are you guys doing, in typical military fashion with orders, they said, shut up and go back to work.
So you mentioned that it began under the experiments anyway, under the Kennedy administration, and that subsequent to that, subsequent administrations finally admitted that this in fact happened. But you were talking now about the harm that was apparently done to some of the military personnel. Has any administration, up to and including the current one, the Trump administration, has any administration come clean on that?
No. This is why I ultimately made the film, because although when I exposed it 26 years ago, a whole lot of stuff happened. It was a big story for a while, front page of the New York Times many times. But the bottom line was they continued to hold to, well, okay, this is proven fact now. We'll tell you when, where, and what was used, but that's it. Not a single serviceman who was exposed to a variety of things, from deadly lethal, like anthrax and VX nerve gas, to other less than lethal is the term I use. Something can be very lethal, but it's not as lethal. I always use the, analogy of, nuclear weapons, very lethal, but a 50 millimeter howitzer is also lethal, but it's a lot less. It could be considered somewhat harmless compared to a nuclear. They were all dangerous. They were all harmful to their health. And in this film, I don't want to ruin the kicker, but there is news in this film. A piece of stuff that has never been seen before that acknowledges that servicemen were harmed and some were even killed.
So what is it, if you had to sort of encapsulate what it is that the current U.S. government is still not fessing up to, it is what?
It is that, like other toxic exposures, that this Project SHAD is one of the registered toxic exposures for servicemen. But the way when you get VA medical care, just like with Agent Orange, 40 years, it was that you got to prove it. Okay, everything we expose you to is dangerous. It can harm you. It can do bad things to you. But it's up to you. You got to prove it. Go ahead, prove it. And what made this really unique was, to this day, the only 2 films that have ever been seen and the only actual information about the harm that was done, almost all of it's still classified. Because the exposure data to the men that were exposed, of course, they asked for it once it was disclosed and proven true. They said, well, give us all the information so our doctors can take a look at it and determine what the medical harm would have been. And the Pentagon said, go pound sand. Still classified. The exposure data to these 5,000 plus sailors that most directly exposed is still classified. They won't give it to them, so they can't prove it. And not a single Project SHAD participant, unwilling and unknowing and without informed consent, has ever been granted a service-connected disability. When you're in the service, your disability has to be to your service. You can't smoke 40 packs of cigarette a day for 20 years and say I got lung cancer because I was in the military for a year and a half. It has to be connected.
What kinds of physical and maybe even mental, I would suppose, injuries are we talking about? And were you able to document the extent of it? Are we talking about a couple of people? Are we talking about hundreds of people? Do you have any sense of what we're talking about in terms of the numbers involved in this?
Yeah, in the big ballpark picture, the program went on for nearly 10 years. There's nearly 46 tests conducted over that 10-year period. So it's a lot of people. The aggregate number is not exactly accurate. It could be much more because the Pentagon didn't do a very good job of tracking everybody down and telling them, guess what, you were in the secret testing program and you were exposed, is a ballpark about 6,000 or so. And so it's a large number, and it carried on for 10 years with 46. The things that medically, the harm done, it's a gamut because some men were exposed to nerve gas and anthrax, and although they didn't get it directly, a little bit of it can do a lot of damage. Or as I like to say, as part of the program, they did kill a lot of monkeys, rhesus monkeys, and they did. But when it came to humans, they didn't get the sign off on using immediately lethal chemical and biological weapons. And to see, everybody can understand that a human scientific test, the best way to do it is on humans. And that's happened in history, going back to World War II and things like the Nuremberg Code that came out of it, that you needed informed consent to use people for human testing. The things that they were exposed to in Project SHAD was primarily a bacterium, cadmium compounds, and what turned out to be the worst of all, a carcinogen known back to them, a decontaminant, which each time they did a test, they had to decontaminate the ship, and 2 days, 3 days later, they'd spray it again with something else and it went on for a period of time, 3 months in the case of Autumn Gold. So the decontaminant was a known carcinogen, cancer, other serious maladies that it was known to cause. And it really gets to the specifics, simple version of the story. When a few of the men saw what they saw on the ship, saw a guy in a gas mask, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to say, why are you wearing a gas mask? And I'm not. Nobody else on the crew is. It turned out the reason why they were wearing gas masks was because of the decontaminant. The guy that ran the program, the scientist that designed it and executed it, was literally forced to admit that, well, yeah, that's why I was wearing a gas mask. And some of my men, very few of them were. But anybody, like I said, say, well, how come I don't have a gas mask? And I said, his dismissal of the collateral damage is pretty explosive in the film, you'll see, which is, hey, we did what we did, and we had to do what we had to do. And if we needed boats and ships, and those boat drivers were important to me.
In the film, you interview some of these ex-military people. They're getting on in years, right? I mean, some of these people are, and I was going to say some of these men, were there women impacted as well?
No, as far at that time, back in the 60s, I in a woman because the women weren't in the military. So but there is an aspect of the public, which I could touch on briefly, which was in a few of these tests, not all, but many, they were close enough to like Oahu, for example, in Hawaii, that the cloud drifted over Oahu. And you'll see that, and they had previously done another part, which is a larger scale, but it wasn't as specific as using human test subjects on purpose and by design. They had sprayed American cities, and it's called Project 112. Project SHAD was a subset of that, the very secret subset, because they were using human guinea pigs. They sprayed American cities, dropped light bulbs full of bacteria in the New York subway system, sprayed schools, blah, blah, blah. But that was just sort of the sort of higher level, just let's spray everything and learn how it works. We'll learn where it goes and how best to use it as a weapon. This Project SHAD was the specific, let's take gargle samples and throat swabs and let's correlate that information to how much you need, how you need to do it to get it into a guy's lungs to kill him, to kill
what did then the men that you talked to who were unwittingly a part of these experiments, for the most part, what do they tell you? Are they puzzled? Are they angry? Are they confused? Are they resigned? What are they?
Well, in the film, probably one of the two primary poster boys of the film, one passed away about 6 months ago from brain cancer and had all kinds of maladies. The one that's still holding on at this point, but very not in great health with cancer, he's resigned to, it is what it is. You know, they did what they did. I'm still an all-American guy. I still love my country, but I don't trust the government very much. I mean, they lied to me. He was a really interesting case. He's the only guy that's ever been found by me, and a lot of work back then, that he had a job outside the ship. He was on the fantail, and he saw a plane fly over, and he saw it release the cloud, and he felt it hit his face like a mist in a fog. And, and shortly thereafter, some guy comes up and says, blow in the tube and give me a garble sample, and takes a throat swab. And what the hell is that for? And the guy said, same thing, shut up and go back to work and don't talk about what you saw here. But most people...
let me just ask you this, because before that thought goes out of my head. Did any of these illnesses pass down to offspring, to children?
Well, according to the science, they could and would. And as far as we talked about with the men being old men, and they've been the gist of what the Pentagon's approach and the cover up and the denial has always been was, we wait these guys out, they'll all be gone. And they're not all gone yet, but that's been their tact. That's why they covered it up for 40 years, and since the actual testing was exposed, they've said, nobody got hurt. Don't worry about it. Okay. But there's only so many men in this cadre that were in this secret test. So once they're gone, the questions will not be asked. I mean, no matter what they did, it will sort of die to history. People may be familiar with some other things. This isn't the craziest thing that was ever done by the Department of Defense. They may have heard of MK Ultra, where they injected guys with LSD, and a few of them jumped out of the windows. But that's their tact, was basically, we can wait this out, and that's nothing new to VA medical care, and that is basically wait it out and deny, and the problem will go away over time.
But you have, for example, now, to bring it to the present, you have, Donald Trump, who claims that he's one of the more transparent administrations, one of the more transparent presidents. You have the current Secretary of Defense, who purports to be, gung-ho for the military and only interested in the welfare and well-being of the armed forces. So why aren't they doing anything to help the situation?
Well, that's the part that I'll fill you in a little bit on that. It's really we didn't do it. If we acknowledge the harm that was done, it's across the board. I mean, I have one of the congressmen who got involved in this a long time ago, just before 2000, when I broke the story. He's been trying to get service-connected disability mandated, just like with Agent Orange and all the other ones, and he's been denied because the political atmosphere is just like, this is just really bad stuff we don't want to talk about. I mean, it crosses all administrations and all political bents. But at this point, that congressman has been trying to give you a current angle on what's going on. That congressman has been trying to get a screening of this film in Congress. He's been unable to get a room to show this film because...
A room? You can't get a room?
A hearing room inside Congress, congressional screening for Congress and media and everybody else, because it is the film is pretty explosive when you see the kicker of the film. I mean, the guy that ran it acknowledges that it killed him and it killed other people.
Can we chip in, Eric, and rent a room for them to watch it in?
Well, actually, that's the political part I was getting to. That's kind of not really funny, but you can't get a room when the Congress is controlled by whoever controls it, whether it be Democrats or Republicans or Trumpers, and they happen to control it now. So they've been denied. They continue to be denied, that's just the way it is in politics. If the other side takes over, I'm sure it'll be a big screening in a congressional hearing room the few weeks after. But for now, they hold the football and they control the game.
The film, and again, the name of it is Autumn, as in the winter, spring, autumn. Autumn Gold.
Charles, let me tell you what that actually means. Autumn Gold is the time. The military has a great penchant for coming up with great names for secret stuff.
Yeah,
that's the actual, the dusk right before, at sunset, right before the autumn gold. The gold, we call it in TV the golden hour, right?
Right, autumn gold.
Autumn gold is that just before sunset, that beautiful gold, and out being in Hawaii, off of Hawaii.
Sounds very pleasant. Sounds very pleasant.
Very pretty.
But the film is about two things, really. It's about the experiments and cover up, but it's also about how you got involved in this. How did you get involved in something like this? It's a very complicated story, as you've said. It's one that has its roots back in the 60s, way before, you got certainly involved in journalism. So how did you get involved in this, and why did you end up pursuing it up to and including making a film?
That's the second. This is what I try to tell people about this film. It's not an expose. I'm an investigative journalist, and an expose is you just reveal the facts, and okay, it's true. Everybody knows it's true. This is a film that the second sort of intertwined narrative is the media landscape. I don't want to tout it as, The Insider, if you ever saw that movie, or other movies about inside the media, but it is a narrative thread of, well, why did it take this guy, this investigator, just 6 years to break this story on the air? It wasn't that I didn't get the information or the proof or the facts. That was the media landscape. And I don't want to harken back to our time at CNN, but you may recall part of the narrative was, and there are some other aspects of this, why did it take 6 years to get this on the air at CBS? They didn't just go, wow, great story, let's do it. It was on 2 weeks. It took a long time to convince the bosses at CBS to finally put it on the air on the evening news. But prior to that, I worked at CNN. And CNN almost pulled the trigger on this story. I'd say we're about to third base. You'll see some really unique footage of CNN footage of me being interviewed, because Charles, as a producer, you can't interview yourself. Right. So I was being interviewed for the piece we we're going to put together, but lo and behold, it's a sort of life is truer than fiction plot twist. CNN put on a piece called Operation Tailwind, which ended up being a big foul paw and blew up in their face, and was retracted, and a lot of people got fired for, in my opinion, you'll hear me in the film say, for a piece of investigative journalism that was very shoddy. And that, in turn, in the media landscape, the media business, basically put this out to pasture. Literally, we're not touching this story. We don't care what you have. It's just something we're not going to do. And not to pound on CNN or the corporate bosses there, 60 Minutes did the same. It was just, was the media landscape where literally when you see this film, when I obtained classified briefing films, 2 of them, the only ever seen, a 3-year-old could have broke this story. They did their own films. The guy that ran it filmed every test. Is only 2. I mean, a 3-year-old could break this story. It's all on film. It's all narrated by Colonel Charisma himself, and they tell you exactly what they did, how they did it, where they did it, and what was used, and it's all there. It's not. There's
so why, Eric, do you think? And maybe the film gets into that more, but why do you think there was such skittishness to air this particular story? I mean, CNN, CBS, Evening News, 60 Minutes, they're not exactly known for shying away from controversial topics. They do plenty of them. Why do you think this particular story was one that they kept shutting down?
Well, in their defense, in a way, I don't think it was this particular story. I've had other stories. They're more current, more in a different realm. It was just the economics of. I have a broadcast management minor in my film and TV degree, and to sit there and argue with a bean counter or a corporate head that this is going to make you a lot of money. You're going to spend a lot of money, and who knows what's going to come out of it, and it's going to get great ratings and be a big story. You're going to win lots of awards, and whatever. It's like you probably won't make any money. Investigative journalism is not a profit centered endeavor that you would go in thinking this is a great return on investment. We're going to make money on this. The reason I never really pulled the trigger until a certain point. I had to go to great lengths, and you'll see them in the film, to literally continue to push forward on this story and not only get the beyond smoking gun proof, but to make it worthy of, okay, we're going to put this on, even though we don't think anybody's going to care. We don't think, the public being informed is an important aspect. But in my personal opinion, about 12, 15 years ago, the idea of journalism being a purely journalistic endeavor sort of went out the window. Business 101 and journalism 101 are not the same thing. And to sit there and argue journalism 101 versus business 101 versus a corporate bean counter or an owner, they have the bottom line. It's a business now that more than it ever was, and they own the company. So,
but let me be devil's advocate here for a minute, Eric. Could it be that they just thought, CNN, CBS, whomever, that you didn't yet have the goods?
No. They told me you have the goods. But the bottom line, I've done other stories where the first question they ask when you come back with the goods journalistically is, what's this going to cost us? And that's, Charles, in doing stories, if you got a story that's 2 blocks down the road, it's a great story, and you say, well, I got the same great story, but we got to go to Alaska and Australia and Fiji, and say, well, it's not worth it. I mean, the business side of the business, I believe, took over about 10 years ago, and I've had that explained to me. And I don't argue. I never had an argument with a corporate lawyer. I've never had an argument with a corporate overlord that sit there and argue journalism and business 101 is what rules the day in the end. I mean, it's if you don't like it, go work somewhere, go do your own thing. But the bottom line is, not just me. I've seen. There's been other cases well known in the media where I'll give you one really good one that I like. Is a independent journalist interviewed Pol Pot. I mean, it's like getting an interview, and CNN, to their credit, interviewed Osama bin Laden before 9/11. I've done some similar things. I did an interview with an Islamic terrorist who's went to Supermax for a long time, and it was basically the journalistic side was go get this guy, and obviously it'd be a lead story, it'd be a big deal. And I got him, came back. It's the only interview ever done with a convicted Islamic terrorist in U.S. custody. They said, well, he didn't pull off the plot. No one knows who he is. And I don't think no one will care. It won't, you might win a bunch of journalistic awards, but it's not worth the cost of, and they didn't do the story. It wasn't journalistically based. It's literally a bottom line business. And that's my opinion. It is, the bottom line is the overriding thing these days. And that's like any other business. I'm a capitalist. I don't have a problem with business 101, but to argue business 101 versus journalism or journalism versus business is just it's a waste of time, in my opinion.
So, Eric, why did you continue to sort of hammer away at this story? Why didn't you just put it in the and just say, you know what, I did the best I could. We can't get this story on the air, and then just move on. Why did you continue to pursue it, and how did that lead to a film? There are many investigative stories, as you know. Most of them don't become films. Why did this one?
This one became a film because in that process of having my day job in the corporate media, doing investigative producing and reporting for the alphabet soup, and at a very high level, I could tell you something your audience may like that, like in the Hollywood, I mean, films are mostly associated with Hollywood. It's a documentary feature. Most of the product, quote unquote, is not produced by the biggest corporations. It's all independently produced and licensed in every movie you see, from Tom Cruise to Steven Spielberg. It's not owned and operated with film producers and editors and writers and everything else that goes along with the staff producers at Warner Brothers and Universal. They're all independently produced. Really high-end investigative journalism at the networks at a point about, when I started working at CBS, a long time ago, they farmed it out. It was outsourced. It was too expensive. I sat at a desk inside corporate media news organizations and did my work and got a paycheck every week. And for all legal purposes, I was an employee. If they tried to say I wasn't, but technically I was an independent contractor or contract producer. This particular story is a good example. I own this story. When it went on the CBS Evening News, the only thing that CBS News owned was the stand-up by the correspondent, or we say smoke and mirrors, and everything else was owned by me. So if it blew up in their face, it's, oh, this independent producer, just like it did for staff people. When other things blew up in their face, they'd say, "Whoa, we didn't know what it was. We didn't really check it out." And said, "What do you mean? You're the one that put it on the air?" So they basically farmed out this not financially conducive, not profitable endeavor, because it's just not a profitable endeavor. I would agree with them. It's not a profitable endeavor to do hard-hitting investigative journalism. This kind, exactly. I was never an allegation type investigative journalist. I had a nickname, Smoking Gun Longabardi, because when it was this important of a story, I do need that. I do need to really prove it. I do need to get the indisputable evidence. In this particular case, the reason why I pursued it through various day jobs, coming back from New York at a national news magazine and through various jobs here in Los Angeles, it was just too compelling. The stuff that was occurring. I mean, I don't want to go off into if we ever get to the merch stage with the film, the first T-shirt's going to be this one, which is, I think, it's pretty funny. I don't believe in conspiracy theories unless they're proven true. And our conspiracy theories that end up being proved, they don't get proven true in a week. They take a long time, and sometimes they don't, but sometimes they do. And the reason why I pursued it was the stuff that was going on with this and the level of the cover-up, despite the indisputable proof, was amazing. I mean, I had Secretary of Defense security guys calling me and asking me what I was doing, and I had to sneak into this part. You'll see this in the film. Most of the elements of the documentary, not the expose, were all done outside of that, and I had to sneak into a U.S. Navy base and ambush the Secretary of Defense and ask him why they weren't acknowledging the facts that they already had in their hands. And I had to get a response that said, "Well, if you give me the information, I'll get back to you." And they did, and they finally acknowledged it. It's just, you probably know better than me, Charles, that no matter how good your story is, no matter how indisputably proven true you could prove it, you don't have a story if you don't have an outlet. If everyone, and I finally got the version from the Pentagon and U.S. government. It's like, okay, go ahead, do your story. Out. Then they started operating in the regular way. Then they tried to tell CBS not to do this story. They tried to pressure. Oh, yeah, they'll see that in the film. They basically put that off on, you're really not going to risk your reputation like CNN did, and they got blown out of the water. This guy out, and who's this guy? And I always say, hey, I'm nobody. I don't really care about that part of the business. But nobody knew who Bob Woodward was until he broke Watergate, right? And there is that part of the media, I don't think that existed as much in the past, that it's the story, not the journalist. You're not the story. So, but that's changed a lot in the years. The media eats their own now. It's a cottage industry, and so that was sort of it. It was just like, how could this unknown guy out here, have all this damning evidence? And it proved that I finally had to go to that next level, which is to get these films from a source and to say, hey, Don't believe anything I say. Just watch these films. A 3-year-old could break this story.
So how does this become a film?
Well, at a certain point, because of that hesitancy of my day jobs in the corporate media, I just kept pursuing it because I originally thought of it as a documentary after a certain point, because the plot, let's go Hollywood for a minute, the plot and the twists and turns was just incredible. I mean, life is truer than fiction sometimes, and you couldn't believe that all these plot twists were part of the story, and that they're Hollywood writers are the best at making up narrative fiction plots, but this one was right up there. They couldn't dream up this stuff, and some stories are like that. So that's why I said this is ultimately have to be a documentary. I sought some money from outside sources that support this kind of work, and then I put it into place. And just like any movie, you can talk about it and sit there and hope some rich guy comes in and says, I'll pay for it, I think it's important. Or you just go out and do it and create it, and then you bring it out, and then everybody says, wow, that's pretty interesting, and I think I'll take a look at that story and I'll watch it. So the reason why I continued on was that reason, because it was just an amazing story. I couldn't believe that they were going that far to deny these guys what I believe to be my personal part of it was, when you sign up to be a U.S. serviceman, you don't sign up to be a human guinea pig. They enacted the Nuremberg Code because of things that happened with the Nazis and the Japanese, and it's just not something that's supposed to be done, and they weren't about to admit it.
What is it that you want people who see this film to take from it?
This is a unique thing that you're not allowed to do when you're a corporate journalist or in strictly journalists. Is we have an accompanying campaign, and a very simple point of the film is, like all the other ones, Agent Orange and all those other ones I listed, to get these guys presumptive service-connected disability is something that has to be mandated by law. The reason Agent Orange, people that were exposed to it, get their VA medical care is because even though they told them you got to prove it for 30 years, otherwise you don't get any medical care. And all the other things, same thing, has to be legislatively enacted that you don't have to prove it anymore. You just have to prove that you were there. The things that you were exposed to were harmful, and you don't have to prove that on that day because you got exposed to something that causes cancer. You got to prove that you got cancer because you got exposed to that thing that day. So it would be added to the long list of presumptive disability for the VA, and these guys would simply get their VA disability, and their families, and once they pass on, like we said, most of them are pretty old at this point, but the families as well would get their disability compensation and maybe an apology for what happened. But basically that's it. It's just to get these guys the VA medical care they earned. And like I said, not a single one has ever been granted service-connected disability for what they're exposed to. They have, you like this, Charles, there have been a few that were granted PTSD, which was when they acknowledged that it happened. They said, well, you could be stressed out to find out you were used as a human guinea pig. And see, expose all this really bad stuff that they say is harmful, but we say, don't worry about it. And they said, well, that could really stress you out. You're thinking, well, and families, there is the connection to families and other medical maladies that derive from what they're exposed to. So it's not just the guy.
So if somebody wants to see this film, Eric, what's the best way they can do that?
For about the next year and a half, it's going to be making its run in the film festival circuit throughout the United States and around the world, hopefully. And that's the initial way you'll be able to see it. Or, like I said, potentially you'll hear about it and maybe see a lot more of it the screening is done in Congress. But for all intents and purposes, for the next year and a half, it's going to be through film festivals in the United States and potentially a U.S. tour of the film, and also hopefully commercial distribution and all that kind of stuff, where it'd be brought out to the public in the typical normal way. But we also hope to have the VSOs, the Veteran Service Organization, get behind it so we can show it to every American Legion in the United States or VFW or the general public. The general public, all those sort of general public methods are first up, and then basically to just everybody see what the facts are and the truth is, and hopefully get these guys the service-connected disability they earned a long time ago when they joined the military.
So, Eric, you're the producer, one of the producers of the film.
There's a very small crew on this.
Right, you're the producer.
And we do have some really cool AI animation, which is factually accurate, which is a whole new ball game to deal with really interesting stuff. It's not just animator makes whatever they want. It's just to be factually accurate, to derive from factually accurate images and things like that. So it's really interesting and cool.
And who's the director?
The director is Kern Conweiser. He's a guy that's been around for a long time. He's an award-winning filmmaker on both sides of the equation, fiction and nonfiction. But most of his fiction work has come from that quintessential based on a true story. And, you know, I've always been fiction is fiction, nonfiction is nonfiction. But he goes back and forth, and he's done some nonfiction documentaries as well that really got under the veil of what you might not see in the mainstream media. One in particular was about Iraq and the surge and how that got turned around and things. And just to give you a best example, politically, we're at the opposite ends of the spectrum, you could say, but I'm an equal opportunity offender, you know, all trades master, none, but a story is a story. And, you know, if it's absolutely true or it's fiction or, you know, fiction gets to take license, I don't have any problem with it. I love movies. So he's a really accomplished guy. And he did
we mention his name?
Kern Conweiser.
Okay.
And he has done everything across the board. And his most well-known was a national couple of Emmys and some other things for a fiction film called Miss Edgar's Boys about the Tuskegee experiment. Really compelling, but not a documentary. It's a film. So, you know, but it's very compelling films, whether it's nonfiction or fiction. He did a great job.
The name of the film, again, is Autumn Gold. Eric Longabardi is the producer, is in the film, is the investigative reporter behind the film. Eric, thank you for being a guest on this episode of SOS America. As always, for those of you who watch or listen, we welcome your comments. If you would like to subscribe, it is absolutely free, so we, of course, encourage you to do so. Until the next episode of SOS America, I'm Charles Feldman. Thank you for being with us.